Diveyevo Order, Control Center of Global Anti-Cultism, Revival of Nazism. Woe to mankind, woe to our German nation if God's holy commandment, thou shalt not kill, which God proclaimed on Mount Sinai amidst thunder and lightning, which God our Creator inscribed in the conscience of mankind from the very beginning, is not only broken, but if this transgression is actually tolerated and permitted to go unpunished. Excerpt from a sermon by Clemens August, Graf von Galen, German Count, Bishop of Munster. Desire for power has always played a great role in the formation of human vices. However, it is the secret power, manifested in the ability to arbitrarily influence the fate of billions of people, that ultimately superseded the restraining element of humaneness, morality, and conscience inherent in man. The hidden influence of the Apologetic Center, in collaboration with a secret occult order that included top Nazi leaders, played a key role in the rise of the Third Reich and the spread of Nazi ideology. Today, a similar secret brotherhood has formed to operate in Russia. It has consolidated control over both political and religious power, including anti-cult organizations modeled after the notorious Apologetic Center from the Nazi era. However, unlike the 20th century, the modern rise of Nazism is driven not so much by mysticism or even wars, which are also in play, but by control over the information space and the use of informational impact. This allows modern anti-cult Nazis to operate in the shadows, leading society down a false path in its search for the real perpetrators. The secret Diveyevo Brotherhood, a mystical center of power and influence in Russia. In times when the abode of an Orthodox monastery becomes akin to a Masonic lodge, when a Christian religion gives rise to a closed order ruled by secrets, occultism, and legends alien to the Christianic essence, when there is nothing left of the central religion of the country but its facade and name, and when the commandment, thou shalt not kill, is no longer a fundamental covenant of the followers of this religion, these are the times when the world is witnessing the revival of Nazism. Today, within the walls of the St. Seraphim Diveyevo Monastery, a secret Diveyevo Brotherhood operates, including members of Russia's political elite, led by Sergei Kiriyenko, first Deputy Chief of Staff of the presidential administration. The Brotherhood has two sides, a public-facing role that involves charity and patronage of the monastery, and a hidden, shadowy side that involves quasi-religious elements of occultism and eschatology. This elite club serves as a mystical center of power and influence, not only in modern Russia, but as it turns out, far beyond its borders. To begin with, let's examine the pious and mystic atmosphere surrounding the monastery, rich in legends and apocalyptic lore. Legends of the Diveyevo Ditch, beliefs of pilgrims and opinions of researchers. Over a century ago, a ditch was dug around the Diveyevo Monastery. Some consider it just an engineering structure, but many believe it offers protection against evil forces. According to legend, the Antichrist will not be able to cross this ditch. Over time, this belief has evolved into a sort of pagan cult rooted in an Orthodox monastery. It has continually been fueled by new forms of manipulation, as people tear leaves from trees growing near the ditch or take soil from it, using these to heal ailments or protect their homes. Visitors to the monastery walk around the ditch, believing these actions will shield them from evil spirits and even the Antichrist. It doesn't bother anyone that the Soviet regime, once seen by many Orthodox Christians as the power of the Antichrist, not only crossed the ditch, but also filled it with dirt, laid sewer pipes beneath it, and shut down the monastery for many years. Nor does it bother anyone that a place sanctified by the deeds of true saints doesn't need human fantasies or pagan beliefs. These deeds are confirmed not by external manifestations, but by what the heart of Christianity has always proclaimed, the inner, invisible attainment of God's grace. According to researcher Yulia Sheverenkova, who has studied this cult, the cult of the Diveyevo Ditch is based not on hagiography but on pagan laws, and takes us back to ancient reverence for the earth and trees, involving a wide range of manipulations with these objects. One can also recall the construction features of ancient pagan shrines, which were often surrounded by palisades, poles, earth ramparts, and shallow ditches to symbolically protect the sacred space from evil forces. Researchers note that the Diveyevo Brotherhood is also a way for the elite to connect with indigenous folk Orthodox Christianity, which includes elements of magic and semi-pagan rituals. But let's return from the world of beliefs to modern reality. While rituals and faith may suffice for pilgrims, the situation is much more serious and prosaic for politicians, as faith alone isn't enough for state affairs, especially because membership in the elite Diveyevo Club is connected not only with this monastery, but also with the Sarov Men's Monastery located in Sarov, Nizhny Novgorod region, about 13 kilometers from Diveyevo. Unlike the women's St. Seraphim Divievo Monastery, the men's monastery in Sarov is a restricted area, closed to the general public. Access to the city is controlled by permits and vehicles are thoroughly inspected. In 1946, a nuclear weapons research facility was established in Sarov. Today, the main enterprise in Sarov is the Russian Federal Nuclear Center. All Russian Scientific Research Institute of Experimental Physics, RFNCVNIEF, which develops and produces nuclear weapons. Another fact worth noting is that the abbess of the women's monastery in Diveyevo, Mother Superior Sergia Konkova, being a KGB agent, has been known by code name Veronica since 1987, meaning she too is a trusted government insider among the authorities. Membership in the Brotherhood and career advancement. Coincidentally or not, it was Sergei Kiriyenko who brought the most influential members of the Diveyevo Brotherhood to Diveyevo. And it was Kiriyenko's people who filled key government positions after the cabinet reshuffling by Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2024. Notably, the new Russian defense minister is Andrei Belousov, a member of the Diveyevo Brotherhood. In 2017, he was also appointed to the Council for the Restoration of the Sarov and Diveyevo monasteries. According to several Russian sources, before assuming his new role, the future minister visited the Diveyevo monastery in the Nizhny Novgorod region. His visit lasted no more than 2 hours, but had remarkable nuances. After Belousov's visit, two strange things happened at the monastery. That evening, the abbess, Mother Superior Sergia, suddenly became ill, and near one of the icons where Belousov had prayed, a handful of women's hair was found. Whether this is connected with the minister's visit remains unclear, but such discoveries near icons in the monastery are extremely rare. All-round expansion of Sergei Kiriyenko. Control of propaganda, the internet, and new personnel across Russia. Over the years in office, Sergei Kiriyenko has long expanded beyond the responsibilities of his role as supervisor of domestic policy, continuously broadening his sphere of influence. His reach extends from education, culture, work with teachers and youth, and the formation of curricula and professional competitions, to overseeing governors and other state officials. Thanks to his efforts, new candidates undergo initiation through the educational program School of Governors, yet another Kiriyenko's project where he acts as mentor and instructor. In reality, this project strips regional heads of the remaining minor autonomy they once had. Now, the new governors, who are graduates of this structure, are entirely under Kiriyenko's control. There are 89 regions in the country, and in 51 of them, the governor posts are held by graduates of the School of Governors. 5 graduates have become federal ministers, and more than 40 have been appointed to positions as deputy ministers, mayors of major cities, and heads of domestic companies. Sergei Kiriyenko was quoted by the news portal RIA Novosti. Another area crucial to mention in the context of this article is control over the information space. Since the rapid growth of the internet in Russia and its displacement of television, Kiriyenko's circle has significantly increased its influence over the information landscape. Additionally, Sergei Kiriyenko's son, Vladimir Kiriyenko, holds the position of CEO at VK, where he oversees all directions and projects under the holding company. VK includes several popular social networks and online services, the social networks VKontakte and Odnoklasniki, the email service mail.ru, as well as various platforms and apps for business, messaging, and online education. In 2024, VKontakte has an audience of 90 million users per month. Sergei Kiriyenko has repeatedly emphasized the importance of information in shaping people's consciousness. The main war happening right now is the war for people's minds. All of us in this room are the special forces leading this war, said Sergei Kiriyenko. The longest war will be the informational psychological one because the fight for the minds of the younger generation will last the longest, Kiriyenko added. He consistently reminded the hierarchs of the Russian Orthodox Church of this as well. In 2001, Kiriyenko stated, "Orthodox Christians must take an offensive position on the internet. Otherwise, both the church and the Russian state will lose." In 2003, he declared that multinational Russia could never have united based on ethnicity. It was, of course, the Russian Orthodox Church that united everyone. Similar sentiments were expressed by another prominent anti-cultist in Russia and abroad, Alexander Leonidovich Dvorkin. The history of Rus. The history of Russia begins with the baptism of Rus by Prince Vladimir. It was orthodoxy that created the Russian language, Russian culture, and ultimately Russian statehood, said Professor Alexander Dvorkin during a lecture at the Faculty of Philosophy of Tomsk State University on February 21, 2012. It is entirely incorrect to say that the traditional religion of the Russian people is paganism, because at the time when paganism existed in the areas now within Russia, there was no Russian people. There were various tribes, Dvorkin explained in his lecture, Church and State. Offensive positions on the internet, the takeover of the information space, and the secret order within the Russian Orthodox Church. All of this looks different when you consider the direct influence of members of this order on the anti-cult movement in Russia. For example, in 2017, another member of the secret Diveyevo Brotherhood, Andrei Klishas, who also serves as chairman of the Federation Council Committee on Constitutional Legislation, announced the creation of a working group to combat cults, which he assigned to Yelena Mizulina. This group also included members from committees on defense, security, and social policy. According to Mizulina, Russian senators were tasked with developing a bill aimed at countering the activities of destructive cult organizations. Analyzing the situation on the official website of the Federation Council, one can see numerous publications regarding anti-cult laws and anti-cult activities in general. One of the publications on the official Federation Council website states, "Pluralism of opinions on religious issues is completely unnecessary and even dangerous." Further in the text, there appears to be an informal directive to law enforcement and journalists on whom they can and cannot publish. In this context, it is particularly relevant to recall Cardinal A. Bertram's memorandum from December 10, 1941, which criticized the Nazi regime in Germany and addressed the inadmissibility of violating the personal freedom of each individual. On the Federation Council website, one of the publications features a photo showing Yelena Mizulina, who works closely with Andrei Klishas and is in fact subordinate to the Diveyevo Brotherhood, alongside Alexander Dvorkin, the leading Russian anti-cultist who has been engaged in anti-cult activities for over 30 years and works closely with anti-cult organizations across Europe and around the world. The influence of the Diveyevo Brotherhood on governments through anti-cult organizations. Alexander Dvorkin is not only the president of RATSERS, but also served as vice president of the European Federation of Centers for Research and Information on Sectarianism, FECRIS, from 2009 to 2021. FECRIS is an umbrella organization for dozens of anti-cult groups from various countries, including France, Germany, Spain, Switzerland, Belgium, Serbia, Italy, Poland, Croatia, and others. As of 2022, FECRIS had 57 member anti-cult associations. Some anti-cultists from America either published on FECRIS's official pages, were referenced by FECRIS on its site, or worked directly with European and Russian anti-cultists under Alexander Dvorkin's leadership. This connection is also highlighted in the report Sympathy for the Devil, the Anti-Cult Federation FECRIS, and its support for Russian and Chinese repression of religion, by Italian sociologist Professor Massimo Introvigna, which mentions two anti-cult figures from Canada and the United States. One is Jerry Armstrong, an apostate and former member of the Church of Scientology, who was previously convicted by an American court. For more details, see the article, The Role of Apostates in Anti-Cult Organizations, Creating the Fake Victim. The other is Rick Allen Ross, a deprogrammer and former member of the criminal organization CAN, which was repeatedly convicted in the U.S. for kidnapping and subjecting individuals to physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. Articles by Armstrong appear on the official FECRIS's website, Armstrong 2009, and he has spoken at conferences organized both by FECRIS and by its affiliates, including in Russia. Even such a bizarre character as American deprogrammer Rick Ross, whom we mention here because of his connections with China, gets a link to his website on FECRIS's links page, FECRIS 2022. An interesting connection emerges. Sergei Kiriyenko, Andrei Klishas, Yelena Mizulina, Alexander Dvorkin, and under Dvorkin, representatives of European and American anti-cult organizations. This is noteworthy given that many European anti-cult figures at various times in their lives have been members of parliament in their countries or directly associated with their governments. For example, Mr. Tom Sackville, vice president of FECRIS from 2005 and president of FECRIS from 2009, was previously a member of parliament in the UK for the Conservative Party, representing the Bolton West constituency from 1983 to 1997. He held the position of Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State from 1992 to 1997, first in the Department of Health and later as Minister of State for the Home Office, 1995 to 1997. Another example is Sonia Bacchus, former Secretary of State for Citizenship in France, who officially collaborated with Miviludes, a member of FECRIS. Also notable is former French politician Georges Fenech, a member of the Miviludes Steering Committee, who traveled to occupied Crimea with other parliamentarians in 2019 to meet with Putin and testify about how well Crimea is faring with Russia. Additionally, in 2013 to 2014, French anti-cult organizations tasked French MP Rudy Salles, also a member of the Miviludes Steering Committee, with working with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, PACE, on a recommendation and resolution concerning cults and minors. It is worth noting that we will return to the topic of anti-cultists' focus on minors later in this article. Miviludes itself is subordinate to the French Prime Minister, who provides material, moral, and political support to FECRIS. These are just a few examples from a long list of individuals who have had a direct impact on their country's policies, while also being anti-cult agents for Russia's Ratsers. It is important to recall that during 2013 to 2014, Alexander Dvorkin had already been vice president of the main umbrella anti-cult federation, FECRIS, for an extended period. The events described for 2013 to 2014 seem even more absurd and surreal when considering that, in 2014, the democratic world was already trying to counter Russia, primarily viewing President Vladimir Putin as a threat, while ignoring the hidden enemies right under their noses. While democratic leaders were striving to protect their citizens from external aggressive threats, totalitarian expansion, the erosion of democratic values, and the violation of personal freedoms, anti-cult agents from Ratsers, serving the Divеево Brotherhood, were simultaneously exerting their destructive influence on Europe, the United Kingdom, Australia, America, and the entire democratic world from within. This reflects the same methodical, quiet, and calculated tactics of Sergei Kiriyenko, a strategy of power capture and covert control, now extending far beyond Russia. 2014, the final expansion of the Divеево Brotherhood. Here, it's worth mentioning another religious elite organization that operated in Russia for a long period, the Athos Brotherhood. Whether by coincidence or not, the year 2014 and the subsequent events in Crimea and eastern Ukraine undermined the power of the Athos Brotherhood, which had previously rivaled members of the Divеево Brotherhood. This happened as the meeting point for the Athos Brotherhood members was Mount Athos, and most of them were subjected to international sanctions, with the Greek government ceasing to issue them visas. As a result, not requiring any connections with monasteries in hostile countries, the Divеево Brotherhood has become the sacred center and conglomerate of Russia's religious and political elite. This is not the only notable aspect related to the start of the armed conflict in eastern Ukraine in 2014. An article by investigative journalist Ian Leonid Bornstein published on the news portal The European Times, as well as the Journal on Religious Freedom and Human Rights Bitter Winter, by sociologist of religions professor and researcher Massimo Introvigne, mention an interesting fact relevant to the context of our article. From the moment of their inception, the Donetsk People's Republic, DPR, and Luhansk People's Republic, LPR, became the only places in the world that make fighting cults a constitutional principle. Can it be a mere coincidence that Sergei Kiriyenko, who leads the secret Divеево Brotherhood, which among other things oversees Russian anti-cultists, in 2022 officially became the Donbass curator, and with the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine gained another unofficial status of Viceroy of Donbass? Many have heard that the main officially stated reason by the Russian Federation for the war in Ukraine was the need for denazification. However, if we recall the fact that Alexander Dvorkin and other anti-cultists accused all religious organizations not affiliated with Orthodoxy of fostering nationalism in Ukraine, the official reason for the so-called Special Military Operation, SMO, in Ukraine takes on a different perspective, as does the view on its true instigators. According to Russian anti-cultists, it was primarily Scientologists, Jehovah's Witnesses, and generally all new religious movements that were on the front lines during the Maidan protests in 2004 and 2013, and they are now on the front lines among the opponents of the Russian world, or in the ranks of the Antichrist. It is noteworthy that in these same years, 2004 and 2013, just before the Ukrainian revolutions, there were attempts to advance anti-cult legislation in Ukraine. This was also noted by Ukrainian scholar, religious studies expert, and doctor of philosophy Lyudmila Filipovich, who commented on another attempt in 2020 to push through yet another anti-cult bill in Ukraine. They asked my opinion on the proposed anti-cult bill. I've been watching this for years. Such attempts have been made before, and we've managed to fend them off in time. I remember this happening in 2004 before the revolution and again in 2013. There's a very clear pattern. As soon as there are any problems, they immediately turn to this topic, thinking it can distract the public from pressing issues. I view the current initiative, the anti-cult bill, as just another manifestation of hybrid warfare. I see in this, without being a conspiracy theorist, an obvious hand of Moscow Excuse the colloquialism. After all, they've repeatedly tried to push a similar law there to ban all religions except for the Moscow Patriarchate, and this initiative is nothing more than a clumsy imitation. Could it be that, wielding such power, the members of the Diveyevo Brotherhood, who are behind the anti-cultists, attempted to influence Ukrainian laws, politicians, law enforcement, intelligence agencies, judges, and the government as a whole, just as they did in Russia? It's possible, especially considering their sphere of influence in Europe and America. On the other hand, possessing such power in two nations at odds with each other, why haven't they stopped the war yet? Subsequently, the war in Ukraine has been framed by Russian anti-cultists and Russian Orthodox Church, ROC, hierarchs in such terms as liberation battle, triumph over dark forces, and a God-chosen people. How can people who hold such an extremely self-aggrandizing position accuse others of nationalism? Perhaps it's worth remembering the lessons of history. State of Christian churches during the rise of the NSDAP, Nazis' subsequent rejection of Christian teaching and abolition of the New Testament. Let's compare several speeches by a well-known contemporary anti-cultist, Archpriest Alexander Novopashin, with those of the Nazi leader Adolf Hitler. For me, the Ukrainians are all cannibals. I called them so because I saw them like that. These inhumans spill human blood, the blood of children and women, our blood. They devour people's lives and feed on suffering. So who are they? Cannibals. And all those who committed terrorist attacks on our land, whom I listed earlier and whom I didn't name, are cannibals. It is useless to put cannibals in a cage. They'll still remain cannibals, even if you keep them there all their lives. Therefore, cannibals must be destroyed. Vice President of Ratsirs, Archpriest Alexander Novopashin. My feelings as a Christian points me to my Lord and Savior as a fighter. It points me to the man who once in loneliness, surrounded by a few followers, recognized these Jews for what they were and summoned men to fight against them, and who, God's truth, was greatest not as a sufferer, but as a fighter. Adolf Hitler. Speech on April 12, 1922. Alexander Novopashin. In 2020, the President of the Russian Federation issued a decree approving the new version of the strategy for countering extremism in the Russian Federation until 2025. It repeatedly emphasizes the need to protect traditional Russian spiritual and moral values, which have been upheld by the Russian Orthodox Church for more than 2,000 years. The Church itself is assigned a specific role in countering extremism and terrorism. In doing so, the state acknowledges that without spiritual and moral education, it is impossible to unite the people, fill them with the sacred spirit of patriotism, and instill in them the virtues that will allow them to be called a great nation. July 20th, 2022, Archpriest Alexander Novopashin, and I continue my run. The advantages for the individual which may be derived from compromises with atheistic organizations do not compare in any way with the consequences which are visible in the destruction of our common religious and ethical values. The national government sees in both Christian denominations, Catholicism, Protestantism, the most important factor for the maintenance of our society. Speech before the Reichstag, March the 23rd, 1933, just before the Enabling Act is passed. Today, Christians stand at the head of this country. I pledge that I never will tie myself to parties who want to destroy Christianity. We want to fill our culture again with the Christian spirit. We want to burn out all the recent immoral developments in literature, in the theater, and in the press. In short, we want to burn out the poison of immorality which has entered into our whole life and culture as a result of liberal excess during the past few years. The Speeches of Adolf Hitler, 1922 to 1939, Volume 1. In its early days, the National Socialist Party, NSDAP, advocated for the preservation of Christian values and the traditions of German society. Within the party, there was a belief that its members should adhere to the Christian faith, as this was considered part of the German identity. However, as we can see, when the official state position leans toward the established dominant religion and traditional values in the hands of global anti-cult agents, it becomes yet another tool for repressing its own people. History teaches us that just because someone says the right things, it doesn't necessarily mean they are serving the good. In addition to these facts, history also remembers what the ideologists of the secret occult order within the ruling elite and of the apologetic center led by Walter Kunneth actually did to the essence of the Christian religion. In 1934, Professor of Theology E. Bergmann published 25 theses of this new German religion. Among them the following: the Jewish New Testament is not suitable for the new Germany. Christ was not a Jew, but a Nordic martyr, sent to death by the Jews and a warrior called to save the world from Jewish influence. Adolf Hitler is the new Messiah, sent to earth to save the world from the Jews. The swastika is the successor to the cross as the symbol of German Christianity. German soil and blood, soul and art are sacred categories of German Christianity. When discussing the new German religion, Bergman stated, "Either we will have a German God or we will have none." Excerpt from the book S.V. Edge and Religious Confessions in the Soviet Zone of Occupation of Germany, 1945 to 1949, collection of documents. Christianity in Nazi Germany was no longer the Christianity founded on the teachings of Jesus Christ, on the essence of the New Testament with its saving truth for each person, the Sermon on the Mount, because the Nazis rejected the New Testament. Similarly, the representatives of the ROC are rejecting the New Testament today. This is explored in detail in The Impact documentary. The rejection of the New Testament and the distortions of the essence of Christianity in the modern Russian Orthodox Church is also discussed in the article Nazis Who Expelled Christ from Orthodoxy, in the section Anti-Cult Substitutions in Orthodoxy, Old Testament Ethics over Christ's Teachings. Interestingly enough, in one of his interviews, Alexander Novopashin, vice president of Ratzirs, called Alexander Dvorkin, president of Ratzirs, his friend and mentor. It is worth recalling that the anti-cult organization Ratzirs is under direct influence of the Federation Council overseen by members of the Diveyevo Brotherhood. In 2022, Sergei Kiriyenko awarded Archpriest Alexander Novopashin the Order of Friendship for his significant contribution to the preservation and development of spiritual, moral, and cultural traditions, and for his many years of fruitful activity. In his congratulatory speech to the awardees, Sergei Kiriyenko noted that this was not only a ceremonial event but also an act of high recognition of the achievements of Russian citizens. It is important to note that it's not the first order received by Archpriest Alexander Novopashin, vice president of the Ratzirs, established in 2006. In 2006, he was awarded the Order of St. Seraphim of Sarov, 3rd degree. In the same year, Sergei Kiriyenko was also awarded the Order of St. Seraphim of Sarov, 2nd degree. In fact, several members of the Diveyevo Brotherhood have been awarded the Church's Order of St. Seraphim of Sarov, which is considered a special distinctive mark among them. Notably, Sergei Kiriyenko has received 3 such orders, one of each degree, 2006, 2nd degree, 2012, 1st degree, 2020, 3rd degree. Some members of the Brotherhood have also been awarded the Order of St. Seraphim of Sarov. Among them, M. Mishustin, 3rd degree, 2019, M. Babich, 3rd degree, D. Chernyshenko, 2nd degree, 2023, A. Klishas, 3rd degree, and I. Komarov, who has 2 orders of St. Seraphim of Sarov, 3rd degree, 2019, and 2nd degree, October 23, 2022. In 2015, Alexander Novopashin was also awarded the Medal of the Order for Merit to the Fatherland, 2nd degree. Several points are worth noting in the published interview dedicated to this award ceremony. Interviewer Dmitry Kokulin. Is it true that representatives of our law enforcement agencies have repeatedly approached you for assistance in solving crimes committed by cult members? Alexander Novopashin. Yes, I have had to work as a consultant with investigative teams, helping them solve particularly serious crimes. I periodically give consultations to experts of the main directorate of the Ministry of Internal Affairs for the Siberian Federal District and the regional and city police departments on issues related to the destructive activities of sects and cults. Dmitry Kokulin, speaking of children, you head the charitable organization in defense of the lives of unborn children. Alexander Novopashin, Bishop Tikhon, blessed me to undertake this work in 1994. Thanks to the center's staff, hundreds of lives have been saved over the years. Today, women choose not to have abortions. They carry their pregnancies to term, give birth, and raise healthy children, and our organization strives to help them. We also collaborate with Orthodox parishes in America on this task. Anti-cultists giving consultations to special services, defense, and law enforcement agencies on so-called sects and cults, protecting and rescuing children, and collaborating with Orthodox parishes in America. After an in-depth study of the tragedy of 1993, this part of the Russian anti-cultists' interview appears in a completely different light. The cause of child deaths in America and around the world. Effects of anti-cult agents on human psyche and mind. In 1993, after the consultations provided to American intelligence agencies by the Russian scientist creator of psychotronic weapons, and anti-cultist Igor Smirnov, as well as through long-term prior collaboration with the American anti-cultist and deprogrammer Rick Allen Ross. FBI and ATF agents committed an act of Holocaust against American citizens, namely the religious group branch Davidians, including 25 children, among them infants and toddlers under 3 years old. Throughout the entire period of torture inflicted by the intelligence agencies, the officially stated goal of the FBI operation was to save the children who were with their parents in the besieged Mount Carmel Ranch. However, in the end, under the influence of the Russian and American anti-cultists, instead of the promised rescue, the innocent children, along with their parents, were poisoned with the deadly gas CS, a chemical warfare agent, and those who survived were burned alive in the fire. Igor Smirnov was the son of a high-ranking Soviet officer, Viktor Abakumov, head of SMERSH from 1943 to 1946, and Minister of State Security, MGB, from 1946 to 1951, under Joseph Stalin. At one time, Smirnov's father initiated an Operation North on mass relocation of supporters of Jehovah's Witnesses organization as well as representatives of other religious associations and their families to Siberia, as mentioned in the Impact documentary. Details about Igor Smirnov and the methods he developed are thoroughly explored in the Impact documentary. Despite his scientific activity, Igor Smirnov, just like his father, had anti-cult views, as he wrote in his book Psychoecology. Thus, in describing various religious groups, he solely used anti-cultist language and the labels such as sect and cult. He also adhered to the same pseudoscientific theory about the use of brainwashing techniques by leaders of new religious movements, which was actively promoted by Steve Hessen and Rick Ross. This was at a time when Smirnov was personally involved in the development of such technologies. Most of Igor Smirnov's research focused on remote influence on another person's consciousness and programming one's psyche and behavior. Application of psychotronic weapons developed by Smirnov included the potential to affect large groups of people for various purposes. For example, to incite mass aggression in a crowd or, conversely, to calm public unrest. Igor Smirnov mysteriously passed away in 2004 at the age of 53, but the results of his long-term research remained, and his team continued these efforts. Researchers at the Institute of Psychoecology of the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences and the Department of Psychoecology at the People's Friendship University of Russia, previously led by Smirnov, have been working for nearly 3 decades on methods and tools for influencing the unconscious areas of the human psyche. Many of these developments are classified today, but it is possible that individuals who have access to them are connected to the anti-cult movement or those overseeing it, especially if they are members of the Diveevo Club. In any case, it is remarkable that a significant percentage of anti-cultists are psychologists and psychiatrists. It's an evident trend in countries like France, Russia, the Czech Republic, and the United States. Their profession is directly related to the work of the human brain, consciousness, and subconsciousness, which makes their role in anti-cult organizations quite fitting. For example, Russian anti-cultist and member of the European Anti-Cult Federation FECRIS, Yevgeny Volkov is a psychologist who works closely with Alexander Dvorkin. In the past, Yevgeny Volkov defended this PhD thesis under the supervision of Vladimir Izraitel, Sergei Kiriyenko's father. The use of certain techniques by Yevgeny Volkov and Alexander Dvorkin was previously mentioned in the article Anti-Cult Orders Awarded on Children's Blood. In addition to the direct contribution of Russian anti-cultist Igor Smirnov to the Waco tragedy outcome, a prolonged process of dehumanizing the Branch Davidian religious group in the media was conducted and driven by anti-cultists, Stephen Hessen among them. Access to the media became another tool in the hands of the true culprits, exerting mass influence on the consciousness and subconsciousness of American citizens who were watching the events unfold on their TV screens. As a result, through the anti-cult agents directly intervening and influencing the operations of American agencies and the media, a death conveyor targeting American children was set in motion, which by the late 1990s had evolved into the school shooting epidemic, first in America and then spreading worldwide. Again, it was the representatives of anti-cultism and their agents in the media who supported the news coverage of each subsequent death of children. 30 years later, seeing how anti-cultists today advise those who should be guarding the public safety, law, and order, one wonders what aftermath such anti-cult influence will lead to this time. Will there be those who will defend innocent children today? After 30 years, the methods of influencing the human subconsciousness and psyche are evolving in pace with new technologies. Decades ago, tragic events required the presence of trained agents, elements of communication and physical contact. Today, influencing a person's subconscious can be achieved simply by controlling the information space, with agents insiders in the media, social networks, and the internet at large. It's enough to recall who owns a significant portion of the information space in Russia and far beyond its borders, and who has an army of agents in various media outlets, governments, and security agencies around the world. The evident influence of Russian anti-cultists on European countries, America, and the UK is a well-established fact that speaks volumes. We witness the results of this influence every day. Just think of the recent tragedy in the UK and its aftermath. After the release of The Impact documentary and a detailed study of the topic of armed attacks among children, the Russian influence and disinformation that exacerbated the tragedy in Southport, England, takes on a whole new perspective. Following this tragedy, where 3 children died, and others, along with 2 adults, were seriously injured, anti-cult agents spread fake information with elements of manipulation on social media using anti-Islamic and anti-immigrant narratives. This disinformation triggered mass confrontations, which quickly escalated into widespread riots targeting Muslims. This topic has been thoroughly covered in several articles. Who is behind the terrorist attack at the Taylor Swift concert in Vienna? Anti-cultists planned assassination at Taylor Swift concert. Taylor Swift and World War III. Conclusion. The tragic epidemic of children's deaths around the world began in 1993, with the actions of American and Russian anti-cultists. Today, in 2024, it still continues with the same instigation by Russian anti-cultists. While the democratic world resists the expansion of totalitarianism, it is being undermined from within by the anti-cult agents of Ratseers, controlled by the secret Diveyevo Brotherhood. We now live in a world where American, British, European, and even Russian children are killing each other by the decisions of members of the secret order from Russian Diveyevo. The representatives of global anti-cultism are the ones who control human destinies and children's lives, deciding who should be imprisoned and who should be spared, not only in their own country, but also in others. Their power is so immense that they could easily stop a war, such as the one in the neighboring country of Ukraine. Yet for some reason they haven't. Watching the news reports on how the anti-cult conveyor of children's deaths operates and how yet another teenager victim of subliminal coding goes out and kills other children, one cannot but recall that somewhere in a parallel universe, on the Mount Olympus of these self-proclaimed gods, in the inner sanctum of the Fourth Reich, these anti-cultists, child murderers, are awarding each other medals and orders, reveling in their secret power, impunity, and delusional sense of being godlike. Today, the price of our children's lives, the price of innocent children's blood, is the order awarded to their agents for merits to Nazism.